What is up, guys? Welcome back to OverTakes. This is Misfit, and today we are doing our tier list / power rankings for the Countdown Cup. Okay, so we're going to be doing what I did for the halfway point, where I set up tier list, S tier, and then A through F, and then I list 1 to 20, and then separate the regions really quick. We'll talk about those at the end, just so you guys get a general gauge. I like I've said in the past, I like grouping teams together in where I think they're at as far as, play and whatnot, what have you, because there are just a lot of teams that are pretty close right now. And it could be one match, one meta, one thing away from switching where they are in the rankings, either up or down. And a lot of them are within about 2 to 3 of each other interchangeably. So that's how I do that. But first, before we dive into the tier lists and the rankings, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me. Thank you very much to everybody that's been giving me some support over the last however long, if it's been since the start, or for the last week. Thank you very much. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. If you're new, just stopping by, thank you very much. I do Overwatch League content 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what's going on. Some weeks we have maybe a little bit more, depending on news and whatnot. We'll see what happens, once we start getting towards the end, towards the playoffs and beyond. We'll see where we're at and what we're going to be doing. I usually in the off season I might do 1 or 2. I might do 1 a week. Sometimes if it's really slow, like generally around the holidays, it slows down quite a bit. I usually do 1 every maybe 3 weeks. Give a bunch of updates, talk about things, maybe where I feel I've seen some roster changes or whatever. But that's for the future. We'll talk about that around that time when the time comes. All right, guys. So let's get into these rankings. First, I just want to go over the timeline that's been going on here. So I probably would have had this up probably somewhere Friday-ish, but there's been a lot going on in real life. I'm not going to go over all of the things that are going on, but there's a situation where me and my wife got to look for a new place to live. It's not like we're getting kicked out or anything like that, but it's just one of those situations where we need to do this, and it's fast and furious and crazy. Been spending a lot of my time doing that, which it kind of has to be done. If I don't, it's me doing it. Obviously with my wife, but through my head, we're looking at kitchens and whatnot in the basement and talking to the people, and I'm going, and through my head, are NYXL C tier or B tier? I really can't figure it out. Things like that go through my head. I'm thinking about Overwatch League while I'm looking for a place to live. It's just that way. God, or it's the God. Are Shanghai that good? They're that good, aren't they? You feel like just I'm looking at something in the basement. It's almost like, yeah, I could see living here. NYXL are definitely C tier. Stuff like that. That's me. And the Mayhem are bad. I'm doing that. It almost comes out of my mouth. Hold on, I'm thinking about something, and everyone's thinking that I'm thinking about, this is supposed to be over here and whatnot. But it is what it is. Don't have a place to live. Not gonna be recording anything, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we got to look for that stuff. And I had a couple other things going on this weekend, but I've been, the background work that I usually do that takes me a day. It's just I've had less time to do it than I normally do. Is what I'm getting at. Before I even started putting together like videos and graphics and all the fun stuff. So that's what's going on. So apologize for the delay, but here we are. So it was a break week, so that worked out in our favor for that. All right, so let's start this up. Okay, so we're going to do bottom to top like we did the last time. And I'll just say a couple things maybe about each team. Kind of a general area. I am going to, because guys know how I am. I always do I'm not going to talk about every team, but then I start all of a sudden talking about Guangzhou for 10 minutes or something out of nowhere. So, we're going to do this, and we're not going to make this a 3-hour long video. I promise you that. We're going to talk about each team. I'll give a little bit of a thought. Obviously, certain parts we're going to talk less. Maybe certain parts we're going to be talking more about just because of where they are and how they're playing and whatnot. And what, all the things. All right, so let's start off with the F tier. Obviously, you guys know who's down here. I have 2 teams down here. We have the Vancouver Titans and the LA Valiant. You can't really, the Valiant, you can't really talk about them. Yeah, they show signs of life, but it was a fail from the start. We all knew it was going to be, and they're staring down the barrel of a winless season. And then, of course, next up we have Vancouver. Very disappointing that they haven't won a game. I thought they would have won a couple here and there, maybe beaten a team that's down or surprised somebody, but they just haven't been able to put anything together. They had problems at main tank, and just things aren't meshing and working, and their skill level as a whole is just not on par with the rest of the league. I mean, the only thing they got going for them is the breadstick bingo, and that's the only reason why they're at 19 instead of 20. Well, that and the Valiant. Yeah, they're another team that's may win one, probably won't. But that's the F tier. We have the Valiant and the Vancouver Titans. Next up, the D tier. We have a new member to the D tier. We have the Guangzhou Charge, the London Spitfire, and, of course, newly added Florida Mayhem. Guangzhou. This also applies for Florida as well. A decent roster, but they just have not performed, whether it's communication or metas or coaching. They did have some coaching switch outs. The Charge earlier, it hasn't worked out yet. They're just kind of very, very disappointing. I mean, if you look at this team, there are players on this team. Rio's decent, Krong, Kariv, and even the new guy like Choi So-wan. These guys are good, but they can't put it together, and they haven't been able to. Occasionally, they rise up and beat somebody, which is why they're not in the F. Next up, let's talk London. London is the best of the bottom teams as far as without a win. They're probably going to get one. I'm going to venture out on a limb here and say that they'll have one win by the end of the season because they're playing in the Crud Bowl, the Toilet Bowl, the Breadstick Bowl, whatever you want to do. They need to put like crumpets on the table or something like that. Some kind of British baked good. Crumpets are they're English muffins, guys. That's the American term for them. Maybe scones. I don't know. They need something to go against the breadsticks, so somebody comes out in the end with some sort of carbohydrate baked product for free. So if any British companies are out there, you're welcome. Anyway, but they're not bad. They're not. I think they're not as bad as their record shows. Are they good? No. They were called a work in progress by their general manager before the season even started. There are people on this, like Sparker has provided a little bit of life to this team. I think there are parts that are decent, but on the overall, they're bad. Next up, I'm not gonna let it fly like I want to, guys. Believe me, because we don't have that much time for me to go off for very long. All right. Here we are, Florida Mayhem. Mayhem, most disappointing team on this side of the ocean. I don't know what else to say. I don't know if Oj is the problem, but from watching their matches and rewatching them, I know one of the things is their communication and their organization and the way they go through plays and stuff is terrible. The talent is there. It is there. You have guys that are role stars, Yaki, Gangnam Jin, Slime, Gargoyle, even Oj, and BQB as well. You have a team full of guys that are role stars were role stars in the past and could have potentially been role stars now. Is it the system? I don't think so, because it doesn't seem like they're running the wrong meta. I don't know if they can play anything, though, realistically, outside of the Ashe Tracer with the double shield thing. It just doesn't feel like, and they tried that, they were going to make that their bread and butter, but as metas progressed and things shift, they weren't ready for it. They ran some decent Rhine comps too. They got better at Rush, but they weren't good at the Sim Rush at all. I mean, they got clocked 7 times in a row. All right, they gave Dallas a battle when they put Checkmate in, and that's the other thing. So now you have Checkmate rotating in. You have a guy who's never played professionally on main tank, or even in contenders on main tank. He's been grinding it. Okay, that's great. You have a DPS guy grinding main tank. We've seen how this worked in the past. Taimu, for instance. Yeah, not so great. You could even go with Jaehong, the Rujay Kong iteration when they had him playing Winston on Seoul when he was there. It doesn't work. In the off-season, sure. And I understand you don't have time to get people. And you're running an all-Korean roster and getting someone, obviously Pine's not even with the fuel yet, and they signed him, week 3 of the season? There are problems abound here. I don't know what they should do in the offseason. It's one of those things. I'm a fan. They were terrible when they started. So when you get a team that started to play well and makes the playoffs and stuff like that, there's a false sense of good. And I think that's where we're at with this team, even though there are players that look good. I don't know if it's actuality outside of maybe Yaki, Gangnam Jin. Slime doesn't seem as good. BQB doesn't seem as good this year. Gargoyle doesn't seem as good. Do you see where I'm going? I don't know if it's communication-wise with Oj. It didn't seem to do well with Checkmate either, minus a little bit against Dallas, and that's because Dallas didn't know what the fuck they were doing. But that's all I got to say about the Mayhem. They're in this group of not hot garbage, but garbage nonetheless. Next up, let's go C tier. All right, we have in this tier, we have some new folks joining the C tier. All right, we got the tier shuffles going on, which happens. So C tier, we have the NYXL, the Toronto Defiant, the Hangzhou Spark, and the Philadelphia Fusion. So these teams, NYXL, they're not bad, but they're not good either. There are mediocrity defined. They can beat the teams below them, they can pound them, and they can beat the Fusion. So in any given stage, with that few teams, for some reason they can beat the Fusion. If they get the Fusion in there and they get the Valiant or something, and maybe they get lucky and they get Guangzhou or somebody like that, who they've lost to in the past too. So, I mean, that's not even a guarantee. But they get a couple of wins. They're getting wins against teams they should, and Philadelphia, who apparently at this time, they should at this point. They have good pieces to keep going. I think that Kalios was a fantastic ad. It's helped this team out a lot. They look better on the tank line. Still not the greatest, though. DPS, fantastic. Jonak, fantastic. Friday's better. So they're in the C tier. I think I had them in D tier at one point in the season. Next up, Toronto. Toronto is the gatekeeper between good and bad in the NA region. They're kind of like New York. They have pieces that are good. They have pieces that are meh. Aspire brought them up a little bit. They're mediocrity defined. They're probably going to end up somewhere in the 500 range, somewhere in there. They'll definitely, because the Mayhem are playing so bad, I don't think too many teams have to worry about getting knocked out of the play-ins or whatever they are, the top 9 in NA. So, and the Mayhem have a tough schedule coming up too. There's no guarantee that they're going to win 3. Yeah, teams can fail, but let's just be honest here. They're on a 7-game losing streak, and they have 1 point on a couple of teams, but they're still in 10th because of they're finishing the May Melee. But Toronto, they have been just mediocre, middle of the road. They beat bad teams. They lose to teams that are slightly better than them and above. I think there's promise with this team. I think they can build off this for next year, and they could maybe do a little bit of damage to somebody here or there in the playoffs. Next up, Hangzhou, another disappointing team for me. They're not quite on the Guangzhou and Mayhem level of disappointment. They're getting close, though. I thought they had gotten the ship righted, but they've had so many coaching changes right now. I think they've had a different coach every stage. So that's like a bunch of different ideologies and how to play the game and coaching styles and interaction styles and how they want you to do your comms. Yeah, they might have been disciples of another guy here or there on the coaching staff, but you always have your own ideas. So you're getting all this shit thrown at you, and it's not like they don't have one language either. I mean, they have Chinese and Korean, so you also have that going in there with all these ideologies and philosophies and styles and whatever that they want to run. You have good players on this team, Shai, Architect, Gushui. They're all playing really well. There's just a lot of underperforming and confusion, I think, too, at this point. It's confusion of, styles, and it's hard to rebound from that, to be honest. They still have a shot, though, to at least get into a knockout round or something like that. And, maybe they can beat out New York or somebody and get up a little bit higher, but that's asking a lot right now. Our new visitor to C tier, Philadelphia. I've finally given up on you. I still had faith, but at this point, you needed those guys to get in here and get acclimated, and now you're down to 4 games. They're going to be big games, and it just doesn't look like it's going to come to fruition. They're not the worst team in the NA or in the APAC region by any stretch on paper. But the thing is with all the roster changes and bringing in people late, which looked good early on, but then it just slowly petered out, and then you're slowly integrating these new guys in that should have been there from the start. It's not working. And I don't have anything against the team. I just kind of feel bad for the team, actually, at this point. And not in like a pity way. I feel bad because I think they had a lot of promise, and I think they could have given Shanghai a run for their money if everybody was there ready to go from the start. And even if they, if the guys got in there sooner. Like we were talking late stage 1 that they were supposed to come in, Poco and Shockwave and EQO and Funny Astro. It's just they, at this point, integrating these guys in is just going to be a last-ditch effort if they can get them here at all, because I haven't even heard anything. I thought Poco was going to be in last stage, but he's not. And, it is what it is. They've underperformed, and they've been disappointing, but I understand why to an extent. You do still have Carpe, and you have Mono, and you have these guys, Alarm, and now you have Funny Astro. They look a little bit better sometimes, but then they go out and they lose. I just think there's a lot of synergistic issues and things like that you can't repair. I don't think it has anything to do with their gameplay necessarily. Like Carpe's not missing shots or anything like that. It's just ult timings and things like that. It's just a lot of stuff that you normally get when you're used to playing with somebody, and they haven't had the time to do that. So that's where Philadelphia is. So that is also going to be the C tier, where we have, once again, let's go over it again, NYXL, Toronto, the Hangzhou Spark, and the Philadelphia Fusion. All right, B tier. Here's where we start getting mucky and people start getting fucking mad. All right, guys, get your molding pants on, or your whatever you want to call it. Get ready, because I know a couple of you guys are going to be mad where I put your teams. So it usually happens. It is what it is. It's my opinion. Okay, here we go. B tier. I have Houston, Washington, Boston, Paris, and the Shock. So here we go. Let's start going over these teams. Houston, solidly in this B tier. Now for me, and it's not me saying that they're bad, this is better than any of you guys expected that are fans. So just remember that. I think that they got whacked by Boston. They were just not ready. And this is my take on Houston right now. I think they go in prepared for a certain style, a certain way to play, and they are prepared to a T. Their coaches are fantastic, but if they have to turn on a dime and change the plan, it feels like sometimes there's no plan B when I watch them play. So when they went in against Boston, Boston's diving them. They didn't start going into an anti-dive attempt to slow them down, stop them, or do something different. They tried to shoehorn in what they were playing and what they prepared for. I know it's hard to go on a different game plan, but sometimes you have to. And versatility and that kind of thing is necessary. Look at Dallas. They couldn't beat Chengdu because they can't handle Wrecking Ball. They couldn't figure that out. Houston had similar issues with Boston and a couple other teams. They beat San Francisco. Sure. But, you lost, and you didn't just lose to Boston, you got mashed. And then there's the issue of, and they have a good regular season record too. So that's why they're in the B tier. They're not a bad team by any stretch. I think if they get some of the other stuff, the versatility, knowing when to switch a comp when you're getting pounded is key. Think about Shanghai, guys. In that finals, in the June joust, Dallas was whacking them. And then they changed up what they were doing a little bit. And it forced Dallas into comps that they didn't want to do. These are the things that separates the A, S tier teams from like B, C tier teams. Being able to do things like that. It does depend on who you have in there too. But there are ways to make comps work if you're on a map and your guy is like a Rhine specialist or only is good at Rhine and X. You can do things, even if it's DPS-wise and support-wise, to change the game. And they just fail to do that soon enough. That's my biggest problem with Houston. Their players are fantastic. I love all of them. I think Django's great. Piggy, all of them. Even Juby has looked decent enough to me. At times he's had some problems. He's a rookie. And so are the two main tanks. So, and I give them the benefit of doubt in this. They're doing better than I expected. I expected them to be somewhere around 12, I think. 10, 12, I forgot where I put him in the beginning of the year. But anyway, that's my take on Houston. Washington could be A, but is still B because of the same problems that Houston has. They cannot be versatile enough, but they're working on it, and they seem to be getting a little bit better. Their rush comps look better. They look decent on Monkey. You're going to have to incorporate some ball, so Mag might have to get some time on that. But you have Decay. I mean, you have Decay. The dude can carry and hard carry, but he can only carry so much. You have to get some more output from Assassin, who's been playing better and playing really well. I think, early on, I think it was rookie stuff, but, and Fury's been playing decent enough. The supports are playing better than I thought, but if they can get to the adaptations in metas and micromanaging their comps in matches to where they can turn matches on a dime and get back into a game, I think they'll jump to A tier, which is hard for me to say because I was down on Washington at the beginning of the year. But they looked way better. You could, regardless of losses or whatever, synergistically and style-wise, to me, they looked better. So that's why I have them in B tier. Boston has proved me wrong time and time again. I thought they were decent, mid-tier, mid-table, but they're beating teams that are above their pay grade, so to speak. They're beating teams like Houston. You can't really count Mayhem when they beat them in June because that was in the middle of the Mayhem's demise there. But they've looked really, really good. Bong is looking great. I love IM37 and Valentine in the DPS line, and their tanks look better than I expected them to look. I'm going to be honest. Stand 1 has played better than I thought he was going to play. So all around, you have Boston, who's taken a kind of a band of misfits and Bong and turned them into this decent group that's in a B tier. Hey, they're kind of a gatekeeper team, but if you're, much like with Houston, guys, Boston fans, you're in playoff matches and stuff now. Yeah, you're fighting to go to Hawaii 2 times in a row. Did you play some weaker opponents? Yeah, but you still beat them. You were the weak opponent last year. So I like what I'm seeing from this team. Are they going to finish top 4 or something like that? Probably not, but they're going to make some teams sweat. They've already proved that they can run certain metas and demolish good teams. Boston, good job. You're in the B tier. Next up, Paris. Same sentiment as I have with Boston. Good job getting the guys in there that you needed to get in there. I'm telling you, the additions that they made, Dreedrill and Vestola, have proved to be big additions. They're beating teams that, at this point, we shouldn't be saying that that they aren't supposed to beat. They were not supposed to beat them then. They have the skill, they have the talent. They also run a couple of different comps really well. We'll talk about hero pools and all of that and the expectations when we load up for the Countdown Cup in a couple of days. I'm going to get into all that stuff then. I want to make this strictly about rankings going in. And this is going to apply, while I'm on this just really quick. I did take into consideration the hero pool for doing these. This is where I had these teams at. It didn't really change much in the grand scheme. I'm not getting into the micro of the thing, but in the macro, I took it into consideration for who these guys play and et cetera and what have you. All right, so back in Paris. I just like what they're doing. They were supposed to be a work in progress. They still kind of are, but I like how they're playing. They're playing aggressive when necessary. They're doing the proper things in matches. They know their comps. They know what they're good at. And if they have to switch up, they're not afraid to. It's just at some points they're just not as good as the Dallases, Atlantas, Boston's, or not Boston, Shanghai's. Good job, Paris. Let's talk about a team that's dropped out of the A tier and down into the B tier, and that's the San Francisco Shock. Shock are human, is really what it amounts to, guys. They are not in a situation where they have a bunch of teams that are in flux or not good, or they're just vastly better at a meta against right now. I think there's some roster, not issues, but there's a lot of swapping and crazy stuff going on where FD Gods doesn't seem to be working out with their playstyle. So they have Violet doing main support at times. They seem to be behind in metas. They don't seem to... They switch their comps and they switch up properly, but they're not executing properly, which is the weird thing with them. But it also has to do with the competition. They have not lost many games. This is the first stage that they've lost more. They lost 2 games in this stage. I believe they are, at this point, I believe they have 3 or 4 losses. 2 of them to the Outlaws. They are tied record-wise with Dallas and Houston, so it's not like they're bad. I have them below a couple of other teams because they're sliding and the other teams are climbing. I just want to make that clear. I'm not basing this on regular season record, because if I was, I would have Shanghai, Seoul, San Francisco, and Houston as your top 4 teams. And or Dallas, San Francisco, and Houston as your top 5 team. My thoughts on the Shock: they are smart enough and good enough to get this back together. They have 4 games to get themselves into a position to get into a play-in out of the knockouts, and they're already probably in the play-ins, but into a situation where they go to Hawaii for the Countdown Cup. That's the ideal, optimal situation for San Francisco to right the ship. You have to get to Hawaii. I will put them back in A tier without a doubt if they do that. They just have been getting clocked in that first knockout game. I believe they got 3-0'd by Dallas and 3-0'd by Houston in 2 consecutive tournaments. So, I mean, there's a chance with the current state, hero pools and whatnot and what have you, that they can get things back together. But I just think they need to figure out a set lineup. They've had 2 long breaks to figure things out between the 4 games they played, or 5 actually. But they need to do this now. You don't have to worry about some of the other stuff. You do have a hero pool to work into your play that you learned about a few days ago. But I think it is more with them. It's more on cohesion right now and figuring out what to do with Violet and Twilight, because they're obviously your 2 best options, in their opinion, on support. So do you have Violet grinding main supports and just bench FD God, or do you bench Twilight and play Violet? If we get a situation where this ball comp from Apac becomes meta, you're probably going to see Violet on Zen. So that could be their best case scenario. Maybe they need to get super working on that ball, because the meta didn't. The main components of that meta didn't get thrown by the wayside, and a few of them couldn't because they already got knocked out. So that was also that's also working in Apac's favor. They didn't have to. They've been playing these characters the whole time. But anyway, so San Francisco, they could be back up in A, but right now I have them in B. All right, A tier. This is where we're getting towards the top of the leaderboard, the ladder. The teams that are going to be vying for the championship at the end of the year. The way it looks going in to the Countdown Cup. I mean, they're overly dramatic, guys. I hope that was a little more NFL today than it should have been. All right, A tier. We have the Atlanta Reign, the Chengdu Hunters, the Seoul Dynasty, the LA Gladiators, and the Dallas Fuel. Here we go. Let's start talking about these teams now. All right, Atlanta. They've made 2 good showings in a row as far as the last 2 tournaments. They've looked fantastic. They've just run into something that they can't counter or reasonably turn around and counter with the tanks and stuff that they normally play and their normal meta or their normal comps that they run. So I think if they gave a little bit of practice to Gator or maybe even Hawk or somebody, they could have gotten a ball comp going. But you know what? It is what it is. That comp turned out to be better than everybody thought it was going to be, including most of the coaches in NA, or they would have been trying to force it a little harder, even with mediocre ball players that are in NA. But Atlanta on the whole looks great. Pelican, Edison seems to be an answer. That's fantastic. Masa and Iris are playing top-level Overwatch right now. One of the better support lines in the league. Masa has been way better than he was at the start of the season. He's picked his game up, and last year for that matter, too. And Iris continues to impress me. He's looked good all year long. And their tank line, I love their tank line. They just got outclassed by the Dragons. I mean, it is what it is. Different meta, different style. Your style didn't work as well against theirs. So I think they're still top level. I think they're going to be going to these tournaments into the final and into the final rounds for the playoffs coming down the road too. So that's why I have them in A tier. Chengdu. What else can I say? I jumped on the bandwagon. I'm a Hunters simp. They do whatever they want to do. Like I said in the wrap up, they play Overwatch. Everybody else plays meta. They do what's good. They're playing Overwatch, and what they're good at just happens to be meta right now. Did they make it meta? No, I don't think they did. I just think they're skilled at playing it. All these guys are playing really well. I thought Monk and Yevitol, who I didn't really talk enough about Yevitol playing Brig. Yevitol on Brig was lethal. He was just unbelievable. And Monk playing Zen frontline style with he had the peel and stuff going from Yevdal. It was great. Their tank line, with either Ameng or Gaga, and Late Young, who's brought a lot of fire and a lot of good play. I thought Elsa was playing decent, but Late Young is playing a little bit better than him. They are just fun to watch. They are great right now. They got to the finals. They hosed Dallas twice. I can't say any more or much more about this team except for they're going to be up at the top. They're going to be playing in the play-ins for this tournament, I'm assuming, against the couple of teams that are decent enough in APAC. But I think people are going to be gunning for them now. They're not just wacky Chengdu. They actually play really well. And they're, like I said, fun to watch. They run their own thing. They do their own thing. And sometimes it's hard to predict what they're going to do, which adds to the Chengdu zone. And the Chengdu zone is now floating higher than I think it's ever been. The Chengdu zone is up in A range. But let's move on to the Seoul Dynasty. Let's talk about Seoul. As much as I give them crap, Seoul is still good. They have a good record. They just can't beat Shanghai. And they try to do different things, and Shanghai's just their nemesis. They did lose to Chengdu in this one, but it was close. That was a good match, and it was stylistically, Chengdu was just doing things that were countering everything they did. So at the end of the day, you just have to tip your cap to Chengdu for that last stage and say, you know what, Chengdu is better. But I think on the whole, Seoul is really good. I don't say that very often, and they're going to come back to stab me somewhere, probably right in the onions, for saying that they're decent, and I have them up this high. I do like them, though. Their DPS line is their bread and butter with Prophet and Fitz. That's what makes us roll. But Marv 1, rolling him out there on main tank all the time, I think that seemed to be an answer. Now, there was rumors that Gesture was going to retire, but he's like, no, I'm not retiring. They said he's fully committed and he's coming back and all that. He's just on the bench because Marvel is better. Let's just be honest. And 2U's been playing well. Their support line played better as the stage went on. I was not a fan of them at the beginning, but they got better and better. I still find them to be the flaw on this team, though. And by flaw, I mean they're kind of average. They're not above average or where you'd want your support line to be for a team that's in the A tier. But when you have Prophet and Fitz doing what they do, there are any given moment one of those two can control a game. So that's why I have them in A tier. So next up, let's talk Gladiators. All right, these last two teams, the Gladiators and the Dynasty, to me, they're A tier. But they're that kid that like aces all of the stuff from like September till June in school and then just like skips on the final because he doesn't even have to take it. Even if he misses the final, he still gets a B and he's kind of all right with that. It kind of feels like that's how they play. They clobber people for most of the month and then they just kind of exit early in the now. Gladiators, this time, they did make it and they lost to Atlanta in a close game. I will give them that. And you can even go Seoul with that. But you see where I'm going, guys. These teams are really, really good. The Gladiators, I've been on them all year. I love this team. The more and more I watch them, they're fantastic to watch. Space has gotten his game back together. He was a little weird at the beginning of the year, I thought, and he's even said things like that. But him and Muse have been playing really well. The support line got its synergy going, and they look better than they did at the start of the season as well, with Shu and Moth and Skewed. These three guys are playing fantastic. I like what they're doing, but I always, you guys know how I am with the rotating supports. At a certain point, it starts to bite you in the ass, but it seems to be working really well for them. And their DPS line, they're running Mirror and Kevster or, Birdring, the trio that they got there. They're running them, interchanging them for whatever meta and however they want to run it. I think it's working out great. I like the prospects for the Gladiators. They just have to do something. They're another team like San Francisco. In order to show me that you're going to actually be someone that scares Dallas or Shanghai or name it, Atlanta, Seoul. You have to get into one of these tournaments and do some damage and beat somebody. That's what I'm looking for from the Gladiators. I said at the beginning of the year, if this team isn't vying for championships, it's a disappointment. We're on borderline disappointment here. Got one more stage. I think they can do something in this stage. They were trying the ball stuff and those kind of comps in the last stage, but they just weren't working because they didn't have the synergy, the time, all the things. Maybe they've ground some on the off time, and they'll be the initiator of that in NA. So we'll have to see. But the Gladiators are up where they should be. All right, next up, Dallas Fuel. All right, they're one tier down. The only reason why they're one tier down was that it's minor, but major at the same time, I guess. They could not adapt to what the teams are doing in APAC. In other words, they are very, very weak against ball comps. Fearless doesn't have a terrible ball, but it's not that great. So when teams are playing wrecking ball against them, they don't do as well. They still are upper echelon. They're like a notch below Shanghai right now, not far. And if there was like a S minus, I would put Dallas there. Like just right in between the A tier and the S tier. They're kind of like a standalone to me. Shanghai's the best. They're the next best by themselves. And then you got the rest of these teams. I could have gone S plus S, but we're going to put them in an A. But they're top of the A bracket. Let's just put it that way. I mean, the guys that they got are playing fine without Hiscan. At some point, you might have needed one. I don't know. You could say that, but I think Doha and Sparkle have proven they can do things that you didn't expect them to do. Sparkles plays a decent tracer and is getting better and better every time he plays it. But you also had the versatility of them doing other things. The Doomfist, the Symmetra. They're the ones that kind of started getting that rush comp with the Symmetra going. That was their thing to start, and everybody started copying them. So you have that. You have the best tank in the league, more or less, kind of failing a little bit here and there, but not bad. It's just against ball, he's not the greatest. And you got Hanbin, probably the best off tank in the league. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And your support line's fantastic. You have nothing to worry about except for the Shanghai Dragons, and if you have to play Chengdu again, that would be my biggest fears. I think they could handle any other team in NA, and I also think they could handle Seoul coming out of APAC. It's if they have to play Shanghai, which they probably will, or Chengdu, which is, who knows, that's where it gets scary. But they might have learned some stuff. 2 times that they've been up against these teams and they've run the ball comps a lot, they're learning as they go. We'll see what happens. All right, now, guys, it's the final team, the only team in the S tier, the only team that should be in the S tier, and that's the Dragons. Hands down, best team in the league right now. Shanghai, we've talked about it. They've won 2 tournaments, won 2 tournaments in a row in the June Joust and the Summer Showdown. They have adapted their styles since the beginning of the year. They picked up the ball comps back in June. They started running those. Fate's fantastic on it. He's playing better than I think a lot of people expected. Everyone thought they were going to get downgraded and they were going to be worse with Fate instead of Fearless, but they're actually better. Because like I said in the wrap-up video from the tournament, Fate should be an MVP candidate. I don't care what you guys say. And a lot of it is his play is exceptional. But the other things he brings, the leadership, the shot calling, and all of that kind of stuff, that is the stuff that's bringing this all together for the Dragons. And you add in Fleta and Lip, who are on MVP-type performances, more Lip than Fleta this year. Void, same thing. Izzyaki, same thing. Li Jaegon, probably one of the best main supports in the league. You have a team that can do anything, that can shift metas, can shift in the middle of a match, run something different, and flip the match on a dime. This team is the best. I expect this team to I expect them to be at the end of the Countdown Cup. I expect them to be there in the final weekend of the playoffs. That's how much faith I have in this team and how good I think they are. They are in that shock 2019, 2020. 2019 shock, think about it. They lost that first stage final to Vancouver, and they just went on down the line and just did what they had to do. They got knocked out by Shanghai, I guess, in that one. I'm trying to make an analogy and it's not working. But yeah, those are my tiers, guys. All right, so here we go. Here's the rankings top to bottom. There you go, guys. There they are. Got Shanghai, Dallas, Chengdu, Atlanta, Gladiators, Dynasty, Justice, Outlaws, Boston, San Francisco, top 10. Next 10, Eternal, Excelsior, Fusion, Defiant, Spark, Mayhem, Charge, Bitfire Titans, and the team that once was the Valiant. Okay, and here are my splits. First up, NA. There you go. And then Apac. No surprises there in how I had them listed. Maybe there are, maybe they're not. It all seemed pretty much like in line with what I did. But, guys, that is going to do it for this one. Thank you very much for joining me today. Love doing rankings and talking about teams like that. I just love all of the. It's fun. And I love the conversations afterwards where you guys say, you think this team's better than that, and we go back and forth. That's what I like doing. That's the fun part about talking about Overwatch League, is conversations with you guys. So be sure to hit down there and tell me what you like, what you didn't like. I'm waiting for it. But that's going to do it. Thank everybody for joining me. Thank you all very much for your support. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. This is Misfit. I'm out. Everybody stay safe, have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you on the next one.